Good morning. Today's subject is lime, and specifically lime as it relates to tanning, and really specifically what kind of lime you should be using for tanning and where to get it. I wanted to do this video because I remember what it was like for me trying to figure this out years ago, and just for years not really getting it and not being like what kind do I use again and where do I get it? And I just didn't get it. So I'm trying to help you get it. So, as usual, I'm going to give you, I'm not just going to give you the dummy version, although I'm going to give you the dummy version first, so if you need to just go get something and get started, you can just do that. But then I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail. I'm going to talk about the lime cycle and basically why I'm recommending what I'm recommending that you use. So the super quickie version is, if you just need to go buy something for tanning, you want to get type S or builder's lime. Now this is a bagged dry powder that masons use to add to mortar to make it more workable, because cement mortar is just horrible to work with. In fact, if you add lime to it, it's still horrible to work with compared to pure lime, but it's better. It's called type S or builder's lime. Just ask for that. And around here, any sizable hardware store has that. I don't know about elsewhere. I've also heard that there's something called barn lime. I've never seen that for sale here, but definitely people have commented on my blog and stuff that barn lime is available in other states. So you could look for that too. What you don't want is you don't want ground limestone. So that's ag lime or dolomite lime. Those are just ground up rocks, and I'm going to explain in a minute why you don't want those, but you don't. So you can just get the hydrated lime and go with that. We're going to move on here to the lime cycle. So I'm going to explain how the lime cycle works and where the different types of lime are in the cycle. And the reason I call it a cycle is because you can go from one stage to the next and then just keep going in a circle, at least theoretically. So the natural form of lime is calcium carbonate. Now this is what you dig out of the ground as limestone, and it also includes shells. So we have shells, different types of rock. Limestone is what we call most of it, but also marble and marl. Coral is also, the same as shell. So these are calcium carbonate, and they're basically inert. So again, this stuff is inert. If you try to use it for tanning, it will do nothing. It has none of these properties that we need for other processes, like processing food, like processing corn, for instance, tanning hides, making glues with proteins, building, none of that stuff. So it's just ground up rocks. So we don't want that. So next we add fire. If we add fire to this and burn it for a while, we end up with quicklime. What we're doing is we're driving off the carbon, and this quicklime is pretty much unavailable. You don't really have to worry about buying it. If you can buy it, you can make your own lime putty, and that's great. But it's very hard to find. They don't just sell it to anybody because it's pretty dangerous because it's so highly reactive and unstable. So quicklime is not used very much. Like, you'll read in old tanning books that they use quicklime, but what they're saying is they're getting quicklime. A traditional tannery might say, tell the lime burners we need this much lime on this date, and they would burn it, bring it over as burnt quicklime, which is very light in weight, so it's easy to transport. Then the tanners would slake it right away by adding water, and that would turn it into the next phase that we'll talk about in a second here, and then use it. So most of the uses for quicklime are actually using the next phase of lime that we're going to be using, and it's just that they're in the process of using it, or immediately before using it, it's basically turned into calcium hydroxide, which is the next phase. We need to take a fork in the road here, basically. So if I burn this rock and make it into quicklime, I can do one of two things. I can add a bunch of water, and I can make like a solution, so it'll basically boil and form this, kind of a liquid, like a milk or cream consistency. But over time, the solids will settle into a firm putty, and we call that lime putty. And as long as water is on top of lime putty, it's protected and you can keep it forever, which is awesome. The other way to do it is I would take my burned rock and add water in smaller amounts, and it would react the same way, but it would turn into just a fine powder, because we'd only be adding just enough water to slake it and do that process. So that's called dry hydrate, and that's what you can buy at the store. In the hardware store, it's called type S or builder's lime usually. It's easy to get here. I don't know about other places. I've heard some people complain that it's hard to get. It has never been a problem for me once I figured out what it was and that, hardware stores would have it. If you have a hard time finding it, check with a mason. Like, look in the phone book and call a stone worker or bricklayer or something like that and ask them, because they should know where to get it if it's anywhere available. So this is dry hydrate. It's just a fine powder. It doesn't have to be ground because it just falls into a fine powder like that if everything goes right. And this is lime putty. So this is like, you know, it's a kind of a firm putty. It just forms in the bottom of the container it's in, and it's not really soupy. It's more like, you know, putty's really the best word. Either one of these can be used for tanning. They're equally effective. That doesn't matter. Now the lime putty is a little bit stronger, so you would have to use less of it. If you're making lime at home, I highly recommend making lime putty and not dry hydrate. There's other videos I have on this process of making lime, and you could watch those, and I'll be doing more on that and trying to make it as accessible as possible to people to do that at home, because to tan some hides you really don't need that much. So in the future you can have that at least in the back of your mind. If you have great access to seashells and wood, just do it now. It's actually really easy to make, and the stuff's great, and then you'll be like, look, I made my own lime and tanned hides with it. Now I want to finish the lime cycle real quick, and then we'll come back to talking about the practical application in liming hides, although I'm not going to go into great detail in this video. If we take our bagged dry lime and leave it sitting around, it's exposed to air and moisture in the air, and it's gradually going to start to turn back into calcium carbonate because it's going to absorb CO2. Now the lime putty is protected as long as it's underwater because it's not exposed to any CO2. But once we take that out, let's say we mix it with 3 parts sand and smear it on a wall as plaster, it's slowly going to absorb CO2 as it dries and turn back into calcium carbonate again. So that's the lime cycle, and then theoretically we could take that, burn it again, and go through this whole process all over. So just remember that when you're protecting your lime. If you have dry hydrate, you need to keep it sealed up and just minimize the amount of air that's moving through it and the amount of atmosphere that it's exposed to, basically. If you have lime putty, just make sure that there's always water on top of it. It's that simple. So one cool thing about these forms of lime, the hydrates, calcium hydroxide, is that they can only get so strong when you mix them with water. And you can't make such a strong solution that you're just going to, like, you know, ruin your hide overnight. The other lyes, like there's these 3 hydroxides that are real commonly used for stuff like this. One is the calcium hydroxide, what we're using. There's potassium hydroxide and sodium hydroxide. So sodium hydroxide is the lye that you dump down your drain to clear it. It's very, very strong, and it has a high solubility. It can make a really, really strong solution. Potassium hydroxide can also be made pretty strong, and it's also called lye. And then there's lime. So lime has it's the least soluble of the 3, and that's good for us home tanners because that means you can just dump a bunch in a bucket or a tub, and it's not going to get way too strong. The other cool thing is that since you have extra lime sitting in there, like let's say I put in a bunch of lime putty and some of it dissolves in the water, and that starts working on the hide, because that's what's really doing the work, is the dissolved lime. And then that lime gets kind of used up by the process, and then more lime can be dissolved from the bottom of the tub, especially if you stir it once in a while, and that'll replenish it and keep the whole process going. So really, to use this stuff, again, I'm not going to go into a bunch of detail, and it gets just more complicated like everything else from here. But you can really just kind of throw a bunch of lime into a tub or bucket and start your hide and let it finish in there, and then that's it, you know, move on with the process. Now there are other options. Traditionally they would have a really weak solution that was already used up. But it was also charged with, you know, bacteria and ammonia from breaking down these proteins and who knows what all in their enzymes and stuff. And then they would move it through stronger and stronger lime solutions. But that's pretty hard for home tanners to keep going unless you're doing, you know, serial tanning where you're doing hides one after another. Because of course in a traditional tannery that was done in, you know, big batches, and it was just normal to keep production going all the time. So I think that's about it. That's it for the technical part. I'm just going to say a few other things here before I sign off. If you don't want to hear that, you can just turn off your computer and I'll wait for you. So you can expect pretty light content from me through about June. I used to tell myself that by June 1st I would be done with all the plant stuff, you know, cutting down weeds, which are growing like crazy now, and finishing any kind of stuff with my trees. I haven't finished my grafting yet, for instance, getting the garden put in place, getting all the weeding done, and just, you know, everything planted and kind of everything running, and so I could move on to projects like building and making things and stuff like that. But finally I noticed I was never finished by June 1st, and it's really more like the end of June, so that's my new date is the end of June. So yeah, I mean, just to produce anything more than fairly simple videos, it's very involved. Even these videos take a really long time just to get them, think about them, make notes, make some practice runs. Sometimes I shoot them several times, and I have to go edit them, and I have to post them and put them on Facebook and put them on the blog and all that stuff. It just adds up. So even doing these is enough, but doing the more immersive, like maker projects where I'm like building stuff, those just take a lot longer, usually 2 to 3 days in total. And since I don't really make any significant money off any of this yet, that doesn't work very well. I probably make, right now I'm making about $15 a month on YouTube from ad revenue. So if 1,000 people watch my video and see an ad on there, I make on the average maybe like $1 for 1,000 views. So very, very minimal. And you know, I have other things to do, and I have to do some stuff to make money. So I will have a Patreon account soon though, and that's basically a way, it's just like a site that's set up to help fund creators, basically to encourage them to make it possible really to keep them doing what they're doing. I think that's a good fit for me. I haven't got it together to get the account up and running yet, because I have to do another video. I have to do a video just for that, and I have some other stuff to get together. The idea isn't that people would pay for my content. Like, I probably have very little perks or anything for people that support me. It's more like, for me, the reason I want people to support me is the same reason that I do all this, which is to get information out to people, to everybody, to have an archive of information like this that is useful to people who are looking for it and can access it at any time 24/7, as long as they have digital access. I'm doing this for everybody. I don't care who's using it, really. I'm not discriminating who's using it. Person in rural Africa trying to start a small tannery to make, a living. Maybe you're like a suburbanite that's trying to escape. Maybe you're a kid that, hates where you live and hates the way that people live, and you want to live some different way or learn how to take care of yourself. I don't care who uses it. My point is just to get the stuff out there. And the reason I would want anyone to support what I do is just for that same reason, to help make this information accessible to everyone. And yeah, that's really why I'm doing everything, and why I'm going to do my Patreon account, and the reason I'm going to encourage people to support me, not to think so much as like, oh, you get something out of what I do and therefore you should pay for it. I mean, I think that's fine too, and it's probably true in some cases, but mostly I just want to be able to do this and not spend my time thinking about marketing and money and trying to make this all work, because the more I do that, the more it's going to dilute my content and the less time I'll have for it. You wouldn't take a professor, like a university professor or a researcher that's like a scientist working in the lab, and say, oh, by the way, like half the time that you're not doing research and development and education, we need you to be over here doing marketing, paperwork, and working an extra job in order to like keep doing your research. It just doesn't work. And even it's just, it takes up, this is my life. I mean, I'm completely immersed in this whole process and doing what I'm doing. Anything that takes away from that is just going to reduce the amount of content I can get out and the quality of content I can get out. So yeah, that's coming up pretty soon. And I just wanted to mostly tell you, though, I kind of went on a tangent there, just to expect pretty light content for a little while. And just in general, yeah, the really heavy content, the really exciting, cool build stuff, it takes a lot of time and energy, and I just can't produce that kind of stuff all the time. So that's it. I'm going to go get this edited and put it up, and I'll see you next time.